Oh my. Richard. Oh, have you ever had somebody introduce you, they just hope they just stop talking soon? Didn't know where it was going, but I was just hoping to please. Yeah, he has stories that he could tell. You know, I'm a little nervous about talking today. A little nervous is probably an understatement. I look out here and a lot of you guys I know, but also talking to your peers I think is a little bit tough, and then I probably have learned more from a lot of you in this room than I could ever probably share and give back. So, but I thought I'd just start and give a little bit of my background. I'm married to Patty, as Rich was saying. Actually, we've been married for 39 years. Coincidence that we're back in this hall. Yeah. She is a saint. We had our wedding reception in this hall 39 years ago, so crazy enough. But we have 6 children. Ryan is 37, Adam 35, Ashley is 32, Kyle 29, and then we have twins, Brittany and Bradley, that are 28. 24 years at Ron Colley and 30 years of college tuition. So what we didn't give away, we spent in education. So. I grew up as a Catholic, cradle Catholic. I attended Cathedral Grade School and Cathedral High School. Matter of fact, one of my classmates, Dave Grandy, is here, so I have to be honest about. I wasn't the best student in high school. Matter of fact, I jokingly used to say that the closest I got to 4.0 was blood alcohol. And it's a good thing my middle name was Anthony, so there'd at least be one A on my report card. So, yeah. But we didn't have much money when I grew up. We were like a lot of families. We didn't know we didn't have a lot of money, but we grew up fairly poor, I would say. And in order to attend Catholic schools, I know a lot of us you had to help pay your way. You had to help bring in money and help the family. And I remember we would do, my first real job was 11 years old working at a corner grocery store delivering groceries. That was my first work experience. But we all shoveled snow, cut grass, any odd job you could do that could help generate some money, just kind of help with the family. So it was always important to us. And my parents always instilled a strong work ethic for all of us. It was important to work and respect your job, and we all did that. So I was the youngest of 5. All began with the name D. Donnie, Dave, Diane, Danny. Until I was about 16, I thought my name was Damn It, Dennis. They would fumble through that, and Donnie, Dave, Diane, oh, damn it, Dennis, you know who I mean. It was either that or damn it, Dennis, get in here. But our mom was like a lot of the moms back then, is that they taught us, she taught us to tell the truth, be honest, just always be honest, don't steal, don't cheat, and it doesn't cost any money to smile and be nice to people. Sorry, my mom's no longer here, so, but those were important values, and a strong belief in God was also important, and those are the same values that we try to pass on to our kids. So after college, I worked for a couple of companies in sales, but I knew that I always wanted to own my own business. I didn't know really why, but I just thought it was important that I could create my own destiny, and so I wanted to own my own business. So Patty and I saved our money, and we started a company called Tanfastic. This was in 1978. We were actually the first ones to franchise the indoor sun tanning business in 1978. It had never been done. And it was my first experience of trying to be an entrepreneur. And we took $10,000 deposits from people. And in 90 days, 26 years old, we had $530,000 collected in deposits. It was overwhelming a little bit at the time, but it was good. The business was good. We operated that business for a couple of years. Sales started to decline, and competition started to come in, and we had an opportunity to sell the business, so we did. Looking for something to do at the time, having dinner with my brother and his wife and Patty and I, my brother suggested the printing business. I knew nothing about the industry, knew nothing about printing, but I was willing to work, probably eager to learn at that time, and desperate to earn money. Kids started coming along. We had some expenses, and it was a crazy times. But we started in his basement, this printing company. And we operated out of his basement for about 7 or 8 months until his wife got tired of knocking on the door, which was our dark room, to be able to do her laundry. Their family room was our bindery, and their furnace room was our print shop. And we did that for 7 or 8 months. He kept his full-time job for about a year and a half, and I went into it full-time and tried to operate that. But I was having lunch with some friends of mine, and we needed to move out of the basement, but we didn't have much money. And so they said they were going to start a company also, and they had some extra space down on Massachusetts Avenue, and they were going to sell tennis shoes. I didn't know anybody that could pay $30 for a pair of tennis shoes, but they thought there were enough people that would do that. So they started a company, and we operated out of the back of their warehouse at the time. The company they started was The Finish Line. A lot of you have probably heard of it and have experience with that, but they started that company, and they were the first entrepreneurs that I really knew personally, that I got to know personally. And I always wondered, trying to understand the differences. What is an entrepreneur? Trying to understand what that term is. When people would refer to me as an entrepreneur, I didn't really think of myself as an entrepreneur at the time. I'd think of myself as a small business owner. And then I started trying to define what that is. And I put together some thoughts on what I think it is, because I think entrepreneur is a mindset. I don't know that there's a wrong answer to what it is, but my thought is it's a mindset. It's how entrepreneurs deal with obstacles. They always say they're good problem solvers, but they get around an obstacle. If there's something that's trying to get in their way, they'll figure out how to do it. They're not afraid to fail. They'll take an idea, try it, and if it doesn't work, they'll move on. So they're not afraid to fail. But I always said entrepreneurs, and looked at myself, is that I think we survive sometimes more out of ignorance than we do intelligence. Because if we were smart enough, if we had an MBA, if we had, the accounting backgrounds, we would probably look at our income statement and our balance sheet and throw in the towel. But we're not willing to do that. We don't know how to say no very well. So we continue to try to work through that and survive. And if you can survive long enough, those experiences that happen throughout your work career turn into education. And before you know it, all of those things that helped you survive that you didn't know become helpful to stay in business. But they take risks. And to an entrepreneur, they don't see it as a risk, honestly. People say that they're risk takers, but entrepreneurs don't see it as a risk. They see not doing it is the risk. They see it as an opportunity. When they look at something that some people will look at and say, that won't work, an entrepreneur will look at it and say, it can work. And they'll try to figure out how to make that work. And they just don't see it as a risk. The biggest risk is not doing it for them. I always say, you ask two guys that operate a similar sized business. One guy will say that he manages, if you ask him what he does, he'll say, I manage a small business. An entrepreneur will say, I manage a large business that's in the developmental stages. They just don't know that. So anyway, after meeting with my buddies at the Finish Line, we moved into the back of their warehouse, and we were operating our little print shop with 2 employees, which neither one of them were getting paid at the time, my brother and I. And so we were trying to grow the business, and while I was waiting for my big business to get out of the developmental stages, but when I looked at that, we just didn't have much money. It wasn't bringing in much money at the time, and what money I had that I had saved up from previous and other business, I'd kind of gone through just trying to survive and live. So we were close to being out of money, and we had one car at the time. Patty would drive. She was working at Southside Youth Council. She would drive. A lot of people don't know this about me, and probably I don't even know if Rich knows this as well as he knows me, but she would drop me off at the corner of, we lived in Carefree South. She would drop me off at the corner of County Line Road and Meridian, thinking I was taking the bus, but I really didn't have enough money. So I would hitchhike. And it was really a kind of a neat thing. Looking back at it at the time, I didn't like it. But if I could get there at a certain time, the same kid would pick me up on a pretty regular basis. And it was kind of neat because he was a student at IUPUI, and I still kind of remember the expression on his face when I told him that I was president of a printing company. Yeah, that was kind of crazy. But Patty would, I still remember some of those times, and I've been tying into kind of the gospel and the sermon today. Patty would still, we've been members of St. Barnabas for about 35 years, and she would tithe. So we had no money coming in. I'm thinking, can't we put that, we don't have any kids in school yet. You know, and we're trying to figure out what to do with the little money that I was bringing home. And I said, can't we put that off? And she'd say, no. I said, okay. So, but I remember those times, and it's emotional for me because they were difficult. But I always remember that what money I did bring home, she would always find somebody that needed it more than we did. And I can't imagine how you could find somebody that needed it more than that, but St. Patty would find somebody. She'd give it away, and but I remember that. But it seems like every time that happened, there would be something that would come in the mail, a refund from a check, an insurance overpayment, or something that might have happened where our escrow account and our house payment would come back. I don't know, but something mysteriously would happen, and it on a pretty regular basis. And so we would run a raffle ticket that we couldn't afford to buy, maybe, and we'd win something. We'd win, free gas, or something would come out of that. And so I always remember look at each other and we'd say, coincidence? And we never thought that was a coincidence. But anyway, that was Patty. Always, whatever I could earn, she'd give it away. Most of our customers back then, when we started that business, were friends. And I know as a networking group, there's a lot of friends, family, good acquaintances that would give us business. Any work that we could do at the time in the printing business would generate some cash flow, was appreciated. But the people that gave us the business knew what it meant to us. So it was one of those things that we always were very careful about doing work with friends and family, not to jeopardize and let money get in the way of that relationship. It was very important for that. I always remember a quote that I always used to use that I actually stumbled onto when one of my sons was asking me business questions. My 37-year-old was asking me business questions, and I was doing a real estate deal at the time with a friend, and I didn't make any money on it. I was just helping him do something. And he was confused because he thought the idea of business was to buy something and make money on it, sell it, and that's how you made a living on it. And this confused him a little bit. And I remember saying to him is that it's easier to make money than it is to make friends. So be careful with that. But we kind of lived by that. It's easier to make money than it is to make friends, so we would never jeopardize a friendship over the opportunity to make money. And so, but I remember another way we'd try to do anything you could. You cold call, you do everything you can to try to generate business when you're struggling. But I remember being asked to be on the board for the Leukemia Society. And I looked at the list of board members, and I thought I could really, they wanted me because of how smart I was, and I didn't realize they just needed a printer. That's why I was there. But when they asked me to do that, I looked at the list of board members, and I thought, wow, if I could associate with that group, it's a home run. I could get all their printing business because I'm going to get to know them, and they're going to give me all their printing business, and all my problems go away. And it really didn't work that way for me. I spent probably the first year of being on that board networking, letting them know how great we were as a printing company and all of those things, and just the business didn't happen. And I didn't really spend much time trying to find a cure for leukemia. There's a kid named Mike Moylan. I don't know if any of you know the Moylan family, but they're a longtime Southside family. Mike Moylan changed my involvement with leukemia because he was a third grader at St. Barnabas and was stricken with leukemia. And I remember the struggles that his parents went through, and we as a community went through with him being a third grader playing football, and all of a sudden he's pulled off the team and watching from a wheelchair on the side. So I got involved for the right reason, and I told you about my academics, so it really wasn't real possible for me to find a cure for leukemia. But I thought maybe I could raise money and help and give it to the people that could find a cure. So I got very involved with leukemia. I actually went on to become on the national board of leukemia, but I did it for the right reason, and that was always a big change in our life of giving back. And then there was another story that I had that ties into that. There was a guy that I met by the name of Dave Combs. Dave doesn't know the impact he had on my life, and probably doesn't even remember who I am. But Dave Combs had a company called The Basketball Man. And if any of you remember the early days he was the guy that he graduated from Purdue, and he patented and invented this basketball goal that could crank up and down. And I remember early on when Dave was making these basketball goals and welding this stuff, and he said, if you ever need one of those donated, just let me know. And I said, you mean, he knew I was talking to him about being involved in not-for-profits. He said, yeah, if you ever need something, just let me know. And I said, well, they're kind of expensive, because they were over $1,000 a piece at the time. And I said, how do you do that? And he said, you know what? He said, I learned I didn't actually start making money until I started giving it away. And so I thought, And that just kind of always stuck with me, is that his life changed when he started giving back. And so that was important. So I encourage everybody in this room, and I know you do, to give to your church, your community, favorite charity, and just trust that it'll come back tenfold. It will. I didn't really look at it as, you hear the term paying it forward. We were blessed with the children and things going on in our life. I always looked at it as paying it back for what people had done for us along the way. So anyway, to fast forward and to grow, we grew the business quite a bit. We just struggled and tried to find, and we finally got over the hump a little bit, and things started becoming better for us from a business standpoint, and it was exciting. We were approached in 1996 to sell the business. Icon Alpha Solutions was a big company, and they wanted to acquire our company, and we were able to sell it based off of a multiplier of earnings. So not really setting the stage for that. We just took what we were making. We didn't change what we were doing from the income statement or try to address anything. We just sold the company. We sold it based on a number of earnings. The reason I say that is because I stayed and managed the company for 4 years, and at the end of 4 years, Icon decided they wanted to exit that business. It didn't really fit their core competence, and so they wanted to get out, and we had the opportunity to buy it back. They wouldn't sell it directly back to us, but we had a friend that bought it, and when they sold it for assets. They didn't sell it as an operating company. They just decided to exit, and the easiest way to get out of it was just shut it down. And so they severed all the employees and closed it within 30 days, but we were fortunate to be able to buy it back, so we were able to send everybody home on Friday and start back up with a new company on Monday morning as an operating company. But what the learning experience for us at that time was that we learned how important our accountants are. We always thought that we couldn't afford that, and then we found that we really couldn't afford not to have good accountants. We also learned quite a bit about our income statement and trying to understand the importance, but that's probably the biggest thing that I'd stress to any business today, is that learn your income statement and start managing your company by the numbers. It's tremendous help. Understand every dollar that comes in and goes out of your company is important. It changed how we looked at the business. We always knew when we bought the company back that selling the company was going to be ultimately our exit strategy. But when we bought it back, we wanted to make sure that we set some new goals, that we wanted to be able to out-service any other company that's out there. They had physical capabilities, but maybe they weren't willing to service. And so we wanted to be able to provide a level of service that nobody else was willing to. And actually, we didn't, print shops, any manufacturing, you always had an overtime rate. It was kind of standard in the industry. And we didn't have an overtime rate. And we looked at it that if a customer was asking a favor and needed something turned around in a short period of time, then they were asking for that favor. And if we charged for it, then we really didn't do a favor. And so we didn't have an overtime rate. We did it as a favor. And I always remember a quote that I found back then, is that you sell a customer and you'll have a customer for a day. But if you help a customer, you'll have a customer for a lifetime. And I always remember that quote, and that kind of stuck with us, of when customers were in a situation where they needed something and they need you to help them. If you were physically capable, why not do it? And so we did. And that really was turned out to be a great thing for our company. So we grew the business. We bought our largest competitor in 2003 here in Indianapolis. We were able to grow our revenue by about 4 times with that acquisition. It really, the synergies of putting the two companies together with their equipment capabilities and square footage that it allowed us, we were able to grow the business. We were approached again in 1996 by a private equity firm out of New York that was interested in buying our company, and we ended up selling the company in 2006. I stayed on for 5 years, is in a sales capacity, not in any management. My brother retired immediately, and I stayed on and worked with the company until 2011, where I left the printing business altogether. But I can tell you that we get credit, and Rich said this a minute ago, I personally get credit a lot of times when it's not me. It's something that Patty's done. But with our company, it's a lot of employees. I mean, we didn't build the company. Our employees made our company what it was. We had 144 full-time employees when we sold the business, and we were lucky enough to hire the right people. It does take a lot of luck, strength and luck to be able to make that work, but our employees made our company, and I always, friends of mine that started the Finish Line always said, put the right people on the bus with you. That's one of the things from good to great, I think, is that put the right people on the bus with you. And they always used that. They were Jewish, so we put a little twist on it, and that's put the right people on the bus with you and let Jesus be the driver. That was always, they didn't buy into that deal too much. But anyway, it is important, but our employees were very important to us. And I think what we learned from that a little bit is that if you take care of your employees, they'll take care of you. That was extremely important. And then the other thing is that when early days, we used to give our employees tasks and challenge them with things and just go away and leave them alone, and they either sank or swim. I mean, it was one of those. But we learned that don't just expect for them to be successful, but teach them how to be successful. And that was a real key for us with our employees, is that help them get to their goals, and they'll help you get to yours, and give them the tools that they need. And I think all of us as managers that manage businesses have a responsibility to our employees to help them grow, and we grow not only from a business standpoint, but grow in terms of who they turn out to be and contribute back to our communities. I think it's important. That's kind of my story. I didn't mention probably as often as I could how much our faith was involved in growing our business. Our faith was there the entire journey. A lot of praying. During that time, I think there was we prayed for everything from being able to pay a utility bill to praying, thanking for some of the gifts that we had been given. So I want to thank you for allowing me to share my story. It's great. You guys, I know, do great work. I've followed you since your inception, and you're a tremendous group. And I know that all of you have similar experience to what I just described in my startup and how I ended up where I did. But I'm more than happy to answer any questions. If anyone would have any, I'll be glad to stay after and do that. But thank you very much for having me here today. Yes, sir.
Stay up there, please.
Yes, sir.
Just a little Q&A. Anybody have a question?
I do. What are you doing now?
Everybody said I retired, and I didn't get that memo. Actually, now the print side of the business, and everybody, you heard for years that printing was going away. Everything's going digital, and printing's going away, and it's really not. It's changed, certainly, but it's not going away. And the company, I'm happy to say, for our employees and the people, the company that I sold, we were doing about $30 million worth of revenue when I sold the company. That same plant today is doing close to $90 million worth of revenue. So they've grown it, and they're just under 200 employees now. But I took some of the products. One of my largest customers was in an industry. It was the funeral industry. And I took some of the products that we had printed that were the largest volumes of products that we printed, and I looked for ways to to create an online version of some of those products, tools that can be done online, estate planning, estate settlement. I'm currently working, I started an estate settlement product, an estate planning product. I showed it to a life insurance company out in New York to try to license the product because it had a lot of information about life planning, and they ended up buying that software from us, and we sold it completely. They wanted the source codes, and we did maintain the marketing rights to the funeral industry only, but we sold the source codes. The product I'm working on now is an estate settlement toolkit that basically helps a family settle an estate. Similar to I would describe it similar to like a TurboTax for estate settlement, where it's got a built-in wizard and it'll prompt you to the steps that need to be done to help settle an estate. It's a difficult task, and it's just an easier way to be able to process that. It's an electronic version versus the piles of paper that you'd have to typically go through. But I'm involved in, still in a fair amount of consulting. I hate to say I've never been paid for consulting, but I kind of hate to. But I do get asked a lot of sometimes about what would you do in this situation, and I look at a company. But I have some other business interests with Rich. We're involved in some other businesses, catering being one of them. Not really involved from an active standpoint, but involved in a investment, and it allows us to continue to do the work that's important to, I know it's important to Rich and his family. It's really part of the mission to be able to allow us to give something to somebody and share some of those fruits of all of our labor, just to be able to give back.
Real quick follow-up. Tell us the name of the company. It's okay.
Yeah, the Palms, and actually we had acquired Primo Catering. We sold back some of the businesses to the original owners, but we acquired all of the catering facilities at Primo's that were owned by Marsh. The one on the west side that we continue to operate is called the Palms. It's about a 36 or 38,000 square foot, seats 1,100. That's the catering business that we have today. And then my company, In Dynamic Group, is still involved in some real estate transactions, and Hilltop Press was the company we sold, which is now Multi-Packaging Solutions, and MPS, and they are now as a group. We were the third acquisition, but they are now 1.6 billion in sales as a company, so they've grown quite a bit.
Other questions?
No, I will say back to Dennis, when he sold the business, he said that he wanted to retire completely. He said, if I want to have $5 million 6 years from now, how much do I need to give you? And I said, 10 million.
Rich might be the best financial advisor that you could ever.
So Danny, I have a question. Out of all that buying and selling and hiring and firing, what's one of the hardest things or most difficult things you had to do in all of that process?
Firing somebody is probably the most difficult thing that I've ever had to do. It's such a big impact on their life and yours, but that's probably I think for me personally, telling somebody that you no longer have a job for them is a hard thing to do. I think there's any of the day-to-day struggles that you deal with. I would say those are not easy, but they're fun. You don't realize how difficult it is when you're doing it because you're in the trenches. But one of the things that I think entrepreneurs or business owners in general, or managers even, one of the things that I think is important is manage your company and don't let your company manage you. That's probably one of the things that I learned, because in order to have 6 children that knew who their dad was, you had to create a little bit of a balance. They want you there to coach them. They want you at their ball games, and you can't be so consumed with your business that you miss those important functions. So probably I think the most difficult thing was being able to understand that balance of trying to provide for your family, and then also make sure that your business stays on the right track. And I would say that was probably one of the most difficult for me, was terminating somebody and making sure that my business didn't consume me all the time.
And what did your dad do for a living?
Ooh, I grew up at 31st in Delaware. It's on the news on a pretty regular basis right now. Yeah. Santa Claus had come in our neighborhood, I can tell you we'd have rolled him. Yeah. The 31st in Delaware, I was inner city. My dad worked he was in the insurance business. He worked as an insurance adjuster. And it was tough, but everybody in the neighborhood, I mean, you know, we always said if anybody had anything in our neighborhood, most of it was acquired after midnight. Yeah, but there were a lot of life lessons in that neighborhood. You know, you had an opportunity to, my mom and dad always taught us how to get out of that neighborhood, you know, because it didn't start off with that way, but we also were in a position that we could afford to move. So we stayed during some of those difficult times where that neighborhood changed quite a bit and crime increased, and trying to keep, you know, 5 kids out of being in the mix of that is not so easy sometimes. And matter of fact, it's impossible. Our parents didn't know that, but it's impossible to stay and not get involved in some of the activities. So it was hard, but you know, I look back at a lot of the people I went to school with. Some of them made it out of that neighborhood, and some of them didn't. You know, some of them ended up either dead or in prison. It was a rough neighborhood growing up. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world because of the lessons that we learned coming out of that neighborhood. And but you know, and again, I look at this group, and I know you know, not a lot of us grew up with money. You know, so we didn't know any different. You know, I mean, there weren't many families in the neighborhood that were eating boxed cereal. You know, it was expensive back then. Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you very much. Thanks, Robert. Thank you.